Say you woke up to find yourself stuck in the 1800s. It wouldn't take you long to notice that treadmills don't exist yet. The thing is, they do exist, but only in prisons. That's right. The treadmill we know today was once a device for inhumane torture in British prisons way back in the 1800s. We're gonna peel back the dark history of the treadmill and how it evolved from a torture device to the world's favorite workout machine. Part 1. Ancient Origins. The treadmill, in its most primitive form, was a machine called a polyspatos crane, better yet, treadwheel crane. You see, centuries before the treadmill became a torture mechanism, it was an engineering and construction marvel that thrived in 1st century AD Roman Empire. This human-powered device looked like a giant hamster wheel attached to a crane. It required men to run or walk continuously within the large hamster-like wheel and exert effort to make it work. And because of it, construction became faster. This invention looked more like a water wheel than a treadmill, and it endured for 19 more centuries, until an invention that looks more like the treadmill we know today emerged.
Serious now. Show me all the blueprints.
What emerged was an iteration of the treadmill that featured a horizontal belt underneath it, but it wasn't for humans. Horses were placed on these treadmills to operate stationary machines when renewable power sources like wind and water weren't available. Sometimes these horse treadmills were used to power boats on the east coast of the United States. This same technology was then adapted by farmers to grind grains, pump water, churn butter, and power dough-kneading machines. This was around the dawn of the 1800s, and a darkness was looming. But what no one knew was that this invention would be caught smack dab in the middle of it. Part 2. Dark Origins. 18 years into the 19th century, a civil engineer called Sir William Cubitt invented the treadwheel, also known as the running wheel. His initial attempts at the treadwheel's design took many different forms, including one design where the treadwheel had 2 wheels you walked on and their cogs interlocked. You see, Cubitt grew up in a family of mill workers, and he originally invented this device to grind maize. But all that would change when his invention caught the eye of the Society for the Improvement of Prison Discipline. As a prison reformer himself, Cubitt proposed introducing the treadwheel to prisons because he believed it would cure the idleness of the prisoners while producing useful work. He thought the labor would help former stubborn and idle convicts, and that prisoners should learn habits of industry in prison. And he was willing to put them through hell to accomplish this aim. So the first treadmill he supplied to the Brixton prison in London, 1818, was nothing like the ones that he made for grinding corn. These ones were a deranged version of the Stairmaster. To operate this version of Cubitt's treadmill, prisoners climbed stairs attached to a giant wheel. And we all know how insanely fatiguing just 5 minutes on the Stairmaster can be. Instead of having someone operate from the inside like a water wheel, it had a series of steps fitted to the outside. This treadmill could accommodate up to 24 prisoners standing side by side. Some devices in other prisons were smaller, and most treadmills soon had partitions added to prevent convicts from socializing. Prisoners would essentially cling to hangholds and climb the steps which would turn the wheel. Because the treadmill was self-propelled, if one prisoner was still climbing, the wheel would continue to move. Prisoners who were sentenced to years in prison with hard labor would climb an equivalent of tens of thousands of feet on back-breaking long shifts. These prisoners didn't spend mere minutes on the Stairmaster. They would spend as long as 10 hours a day in summer and 7 in winter. One of the longest documented sessions on the treadwheel was at Warwick Prison, where prisoners climbed a combined 17,000 vertical feet in the space of 10 hours. To put this into perspective, that's like climbing the Empire State Building 13 times. This exertion of fatigue, combined with poor diets, often led to injury and illness, but that didn't stop penitentiaries all over Britain and the United States from buying the machines and using them on prisoners. Later on, these treadmills were set up to provide human power for gear-operated grain mills or water pumps, sort of like a water wheel, but that wasn't the point. It was just a useless but exhausting task that fitted with Victorian ideals about atonement achieved through hard work. And soon enough, the world would start to see the treadwheel for what it really was, but not until the machine tasted and basked in the blood of prisoners. Part 3. Death on the Treadmill. One of the deadliest treadmills was the first New York treadmill installed by the New York City Jail in 1822. It was in a 2-story stone house, 60 feet long, near the prison. Every 2 minutes a bell sounded and one prisoner stepped off and was permitted to sit still for a few minutes while another took his place. In this manner, the operation continued incessantly for several hours. This installation was the first of many in US prisons that spread terror in the hearts of inmates. A prison guard named James Hardy in 1824 confessed that this device was capable of taming New York's most defiant inmates. He said that it was the treadmill's monotonous steadiness and not its severity that constituted its terror. Seems the machine that Cubitt thought to kill boredom would start killing from boredom. By the Prison Act of 1865, every male prisoner over 16 sentenced to hard labor had to spend 3 months at least of his sentence in the labor of first class, which consisted primarily of the treadmill. Over time, the idea that the device would cure a criminal by sweating him out started being questioned. Convicts obviously hated it, and no real results were coming out of the entire exercise. In fact, a prisoner with heart disease named W.M. Morgan died on the treadwheel in Durham Prison, England. And that is just one documented life that the treadmill claimed. It was even reported by the British Medical Journal in 1885 that the death rate at Durham Prison averaged at 1 death per week, and they had the treadwheel to blame. Some investigations believe that this machine is one of many reasons behind the death of celebrity poet and playwright Oscar Wilde. Wilde spent 2 years on the treadmill as punishment for gross indecency with certain male persons. He even wrote about his incarceration experience in a poem stating, "We banged the tins and bawled the hymns and sweated on the mill, but in the heart of every man, terror was lying still." Apparently, Wilde never recovered from the brutal treatment and he died 3 years after his release at age 46. As the 19th century was coming to an end, critics and human rights activists started doubling down on the abolishment of the cruel treadmill. Those with penal authority were urged to consider devising a form of punishment that was adequately deterrent, free from direct life-threatening dangers, and incorporated a reformatory principle that served a more constructive purpose than mere hard labor. Slowly, the treadmill as a means of torture device in prisons phased out. It was used in prisons until 1898, when the Prisons Act of 1898 was issued. This led to the abolishment of the machine in prisons. By 1895, there were just 39 in use across Britain and merely 13 by 1901. By 1902, it started to become a myth. But this machine would go from serving in prisons to saving in gyms all across the world. Part 4. Evolution. After the treadmill vanished in 1902, no one heard a word of this monstrosity until it reared its head again in 1911. This time, it was no more a monstrosity that struck fear in the heart of the most dangerous criminals. It was now called training machine. Claude Lorraine Hagen filed a patent for this training machine equipped with a treadmill belt in 1911, but it wasn't until 1913 that the patent would be granted. Surprisingly, it was notably detailed and advanced for its time. Hagen envisioned his machine as foldable for easy transport. He designed it to accommodate users of different heights by including adjustable side rails. He suspected it might be noisy, so to curb the noise, he attached 4 outer posts to elevate the belt off the ground. The elevation also allowed for incline adjustments. The sad part about all this is that Hagen never turned this design into a working prototype, or at least there is no evidence that proves otherwise. Regardless, the blueprint of this patent is still very vital to the history of the treadmill, and it is still cited in contemporary treadmill patents and designs. A decade after Hagen's patent was granted, the era of wonderful nonsense emerged. This era saw wealthy individuals adapting a curious trend: dog treadmills being customized for human use. These devices were seemingly more for show than practicality, and they featured wooden slats that made running difficult, a stark contrast to the continuous rubber belts we're accustomed to today. As the following decade unfolded, treadmill designs saw minor improvements, though they still lacked proper functionality. Wooden slats were replaced with fabric, but the treadmills remained motorless and required significant effort to generate momentum. Due to their high cost, these treadmills were predominantly found among the affluent. Fast forward to the 1950s and the treadmill evolved into a motorized health and fitness monitoring equipment. It was Dr. Robert Bruce and his colleague Wayne Quinton at the University of Washington who invented the medical treadmill in 1952. At this point in time, the machine that once made men collapse to death transformed into a tool that would prevent such from happening by diagnosing lung and heart diseases. You see, back then, doctors lacked a method for monitoring cardiac function in exercising patients. So, Dr. Bruce conceived the idea of linking a patient to an electrocardiograph machine while running on a treadmill. This led to the development of the cardiac stress test, now known as the Bruce Protocol, which remains widely used today. Part 5. Your favorite workout machine. In the late 1960s, the world saw the introduction of the first mass-produced home treadmill, invented by mechanical engineer William Staub. Staub had drawn inspiration from Aerobics, a book by Dr. Kenneth Cooper, a former Air Force colonel. Dr. Cooper's book featured a points-based system to measure and improve cardiovascular fitness and advocated running for at least 8 minutes a day, 5 times a week, to combat sedentary behavior. Staub built a prototype treadmill, the Pacemaster 600, and sent it to Dr. Cooper for approval. Recognizing the potential for a home treadmill, Dr. Cooper pledged to fund the machine through his company, Aerobics Incorporated, helping Staub reach a mass audience. By the 1980s, Aerobics Incorporated was selling 2,000 treadmills annually, and by the mid-90s, sales had surged to an impressive 35,000 units per year. Innovations in treadmill technology continued steadily, with a growing emphasis on comfort and usability. In 1991, Life Fitness, one of the world's most popular fitness equipment brands, introduced their first treadmill after decades of focusing on exercise bikes. The 9500 HR featured a patented shock absorption system, and despite taking a week to assemble, it launched Life Fitness into a new market. While the core technology of treadmills hasn't seen dramatic changes recently, significant advancements have come from additional features. Life Fitness pioneered the integration of a touchscreen console in 2003 and later added iPod-iPhone connectivity. Leading brands have continued to innovate with built-in TVs, seamless smart device connectivity, virtual race experiences, and custom exercise plans based on a user's stride length and cadence. Today's companies, innovators, and researchers focus on incremental improvements and added features rather than major changes to the treadmill's form and function. For instance, in 2015, researchers at Ohio State University developed a treadmill that automatically adjusts its speed based on the runner's position. Using sonar, the treadmill identifies where the runner is on the belt, increasing speed if the runner moves forward and decreasing it if they move back. At the other end of the innovation spectrum is Peloton Interactive Incorporated, an American exercise equipment and media company now valued at over $1.4 billion after substantial investment. Today's treadmill allows people to run or walk indoors, regardless of the weather, whether at home or at the gym. Despite its convenience, it remains a device that many find painful, boring, and sometimes even cruel. Injuries and fatalities still occur on treadmills, yet we continue to use them by choice. Isn't it interesting how the treadmill went from a construction mechanism to a torture device and then to a fitness miracle? Does it make you wonder what next would it evolve to in the centuries to come? I bet next time you mount the treadmill in your gym to get your workout in, you'll probably never look at it the same way because you now know the dark origins of your favorite workout machine.
I want to quit the gym.